Now, the rising cost of living continues to be a concern globally. Well, in fact, according to the survey conducted by the World Economic Forum, the latest report claims that Europe's energy crisis and the global food crisis are among the top risks facing the global economy over the next 2 years. To look at this further, we're joined by Riskrecon's Dr. Kingsley Makhubela. Doc, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. I mean, it's interesting that the World Economic Forum report is saying that, look, when it comes to the food crisis, the energy crisis, and the effects of what's happened in the Ukraine, that's just not short-lived. It's likely that this will be around for at least 4 years, according to the report, and it's a risk you've got to take seriously, isn't it?
Good afternoon, Devin, and to your viewers. Well, indeed, this time around, the report of the World Economic Forum has raised sharply the question of prices as a factor, particularly food prices.
Yeah.
Of course, compounded by the conflict that is going on in Ukraine. But that is trickling down also to the question of challenges around social cohesion and intolerance that is starting to build up in many societies. You're starting to see that filtering through. And if you look at the report this time around, Devin, they have identified 5 variants that they think are top 5 with respect to South Africa. They are talking about one of it right at the top. They're talking about the collapse of the state. I just think that's a misnomer, because the concept of state collapse is totally different. We haven't even started with the state failure, because the state failure and state collapse are totally different phenomena. So they are jumping. I think there's been a mistake in terms of how to identify the challenges around the weaknesses of the state, and we're starting to see element of state failure, not state collapse. And we are not yet at the state failure level. So they identify that the question of prices, question of employment, as the challenges that we are having in South Africa. But the biggest problem, Devin, is the question of our debt. $256 billion, which translates to about 4.3 trillion rands. And with the sluggish economy that we're seeing, we're having a challenge actually to meet our obligation with respect to this debt.
And then you have on Tuesday, as we heard from the President's office, President Cyril Ramaphosa off to Davos again. And essentially what's this been for South Africa was that you sell the country to investors. And time again, we try and convince the investors to bring in that much needed investment and to create what you just brought up there, jobs, much needed jobs. I'm wondering, just given the peculiar circumstances of South Africa, the task of convincing an investor to bring in billions under the current state of circumstances at the moment is going to be a very, very tough one, isn't it?
There are a lot of, quite correct. There are a lot of things that we need to do as a society. Part of what is going on around the world, not only in South Africa, it's the collapse of the public infrastructure. So in South Africa, that is compounded by our own dynamics related to corruption when it comes to public infrastructure and so on. So you need a viable public infrastructure for investment. But there are other forces at play. We at Riskrecon have written an ebook sometimes that we released sometimes last year, October, where we are starting to identify certain variants that are happening around the world that may impact on us. And I'm glad the report of the World Economic Forum accentuates some of those issues. For instance, the question of the global confrontation between big powers and the scramble for resources. And most of these resources are based in the continent. And we also at Riskrecon look into the internal dynamics of South Africa, how it's impacting on this, and how we're going to be able to compete with everyone else in attracting investment. But this time around, the World Economic Forum also identified the question of weaponization of trade around the world in terms of sanctions that are being imposed because of the conflict in Russia, the extraterritoriality issues that are starting to emerge. You'll be surprised, Devin, because the report says countries like Switzerland and the US are starting to develop a filter for investment. And those filters, they identify them as extraterritoriality, effectively imposing certain conditions on countries that are not supposed to be there.
Yeah, and that's the one end of it. And you mentioned something very interesting, the fact that South Africa needs this investment. You're going to need more investment for more contributions to your tax coffers as businesses unfold and take off. And it's only that effectively can manage your debt, because if you don't have that, a growing economy, your debt is likely to move in a direction that's just not favorable. So it's a bit of a quagmire, isn't it? You've got to fix up everything and make sure that investors are confident with putting up shop here.
It is. One of the things that this time around they also identify, and this speaks specifically to South Africa, they have identified in this report that you are likely to see an increase of illicit business that would undermine the mainstream business. So we're starting to see those elements in South Africa. I mean, the illicit mining in the country, some time ago I saw a report, it's costing South Africa those 952 billion rands. It's a lot of money, and that money does not filter through the fiscus and contribute in terms of assisting us to pay our national debt. So this is one challenge that we're starting to see. We're starting to hear about construction mafias and about certain illicit businesses. You start to hear about pressure being put on businesses to give deals to some other people. I mean, I was quite astonished this week to see in a media report that a company decided to withdraw certain activities in the mining sector because of threats, and people are starting to resign. So you're starting to see that kind of criminal syndicates taking over, which really compound our ability to attract business. A lot of people are raising questions around our ability to maintain law and order and security in the business and be able to allow legitimate business to function without any interference. So these are the challenges that are identified in this risk. And we have, in the past, raised these issues sharply as Riskrecon, that we really need to pay more attention to these issues as a country. If we don't, we are likely to face challenges in terms of continuing to attract investment into the country.
As I wrap up with you, Dr. Makhubela, I want to touch on your last point there, because I think it is a staggering threat, and that is that you speak of, this mafia component to companies that are coming in where monies are demanded. It's been covered quite extensively of late, and I'm wondering, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, many people feel that we do not have the capability to stop this. We see it at Eskom, we see it at construction sites across the country. It's becoming more prominent, and there's the feeling that we've gotten to a stage of corruption and crime in this country where we can't stop it. What's your take?
We can stop it. It requires political will. It requires collective societal energies to deal with this issue. And we have the institutional capacity. We have resources within the NPA, within the police to deal with this thing. What lacks is the political will to confront this thing head on, because you find some of these elements that are involved are intertwined in the political establishment. Look at what's going on at the University of Port Harcourt now, that even the academic institution are starting to face threats from criminal syndicate. One area that you never thought of in the past. Very soon you're going to get people who threaten people like me not to make certain comments. So we can't allow criminal syndicates to take over our running and the running of the country. We need to stand up as a society, and we need to provide the support to the police, but the police need to do their part of the bargain in dealing with the scourge that is starting to emerge. It's still early. I mean, I was reading an article that in Chile, they have seen a serious theft of copper from container. We haven't reached that stage, and somebody was saying, but we are likely to reach that stage if we don't take appropriate action to deal with these criminal syndicates that are emerging, and that most of them are intertwined within the political establishment.
Just to add on that before I let you go, you've spoken about the social mobility to end this, but I mean, many would say that if government doesn't have the resources and the political will to do that, it might not disappear. Are we properly equipped on a political level to stop this?
You know, the action of the civil society in this country, it's much more better than in any other country. The civil society is up in arms. The independence of the media, it's up in terms of raising these issues sharply and educating the public around these issues and standing up around these issues. Because, Devin, really, people who are involved in this are our relatives, our friends. We know about them. And if we don't stand up and take action against them, we are likely to see serious challenges, not only for us. We are squandering the wealth of future generations, and we need to take action now.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for your insights. That's Riskrecon's Dr. Kingsley Makhubela there.